What was the worst experience you've had during Halloween? Getting so excited with all the candy I had and puking into the bucket of candy. I was walking home with my friend when I was like 9 and a car of high school kids or around that age stole all our candy. 3 hours of work, gone. Had the stomach flu 1 year on Halloween. I was a month shy of turning 11. My parents took my younger siblings out trick-or-treating and I was stuck alone in the house blowing chunks out of both ends. I was in the 5th grade and went going to trick-or-treat. I got this pain in my lower stomach so my mom took me back home. After what my mom saw in the bathroom, we figured out I started my period for the very first time. I was like 7 or 8 and dressed like an angel. Parents took me to the science museum where they set up little houses for the kids to trick or treat in. I got so much candy and was so proud of myself. But when we left, all my candy was gone. The little boy behind me had been taking scoops of my candy and putting it in his basket. I cried. My mom took away all my candy to give to the later kids. My friends telling me they weren't doing anything only to all hang out all evening while I stayed home alone. Teen years can suck. Edit. I must clarify this was like 15 years ago. Thankfully I have some great friends now. Not being able to celebrate Halloween as a kid and watching all my friends go trick-or-treating from my window. My mom was pretty strict with how much candy I was allowed to eat on Halloween. 1 year. After some annoying begging, I finally got my mom to say, "Eat as much as you want." Hey, spent about an hour barfing up peanut butter cups and warheads. I grew up in northern Canada and when I was probably 5 or 6, I got me a Darth Vader costume, one of those vinyl costume and capes with a lightsaber and thin plastic mask. I thought I was so cool back then. Well, being northern Canada, it was exceptionally cold that year. Like below -30°C. I went out that evening bundled up and ready to show off my cool outfit, but it was so cold. The costume just cracked and disintegrated as I went around the block. Due to the weather, I barely got around the block, but by the time I was home, I just had the lightsaber and mask. The rest of the costume just fell apart in pieces as I moved. My appendix burst the Halloween I was 12 and I had to have surgery. I was delirious with fever and one of the nurses was dressed as a clown and one as a vampire and it scared the frock out of me. I don't remember much but my mother says I screamed and cried not to be killed before they knocked my ass out. A woman telling me I'm too old to go trick-or-treat. I was 14 and I went out with my group of friends and I was always the one left out. They dressed in girly costumes and I was a full-on clown with big shoes. I walked with of the girls' moms the entire time because they were ahead and the big shoes slowed me down. They went into a haunted house and I was too scared so I waited outside and then I couldn't sleep over because I was really allergic to my friend's cat. I did find a $20 bull on the floor though. Halloween 2014. My dad died. He had cancer and I had a flight out November 1st to say goodbye. Got a call early on Halloween morning telling me to get on a plane. ASAP. During my layover I got the call he had passed. Holiday still kinda sucks for me. Getting tear-gassed on Polk Street. In San Francisco, mid-1970s. Evening. Everyone is milling around in crazy Halloween costumes. Lots of fun. Very chill. Until some asshole chucks a tear gas canister into the crowd. Pure chaos ensued. And my throat was sore for 24 hours. I was 12 and a man yelled at me and told me I was too old to be out trick-or-treating. I felt so bad I gave all my candy to my little brother and just walked with him for next hour or so. When I got home my mom asked me why I didn't have any candy so I told her what happened. She asked me who said that to me and I told her which house. I don't know if she ever did anything about it. But since I've become an adult and bought my own home, I don't care if you're 90 years old. You're getting candy. Halloween is for everyone. Brother died 2 years ago. He had battled cancer for a while. The Great Pumpkin took him home. My mom's funeral happened to fall on Halloween. When I was a child I had a Barney-ish costume. It was a homemade hand-me-down dinosaur that was the right color palette to be Barney. The main costume was the body. And there was a headpiece of the dino head that went on top of my head. When I looked in the mirror, with the dino head, its friendly felt teeth, and then my face below that, all I could see was that it looked like Barney was eating me alive. And I was not having it. I threw a tantrum and refused to wear the head. So if you lived in Pennsylvania in the late 90s, and had a half-girl half-knockoff Barney show up at your door, now you know why. Skinned my leg on someone's driveway and covered it with blood. Then waited a few hours for a ride to come that didn't come when it was also cold and a police officer brought us home. Got made fun of and bullied for wearing a full costume when I was 13. Cried and wanted to go home by like 5 p.m. There was one true friend who waited with me at a park until my parents came to pick me up. My dad got fired on Halloween once out of nowhere when I was 10. No explanation or anything, so we had to move the next week for him to try to find a new job. Also, I got sick a couple Halloweens. My mom picking me up so drunk another parent give us a ride home. Everyone knew from that point on my mom was a drunk. I was in 4th grade. She died when I was 21 from liver failure. I got ditched by people who I thought were my friends in high school while we were trick-or-treating, being teenagers. I had to walk a mile and a half home by myself. Sucks, man. I had to wear a dress for school all the time. This one was below my knees, and when I was running, my feet got caught in the dress. I fell and skinned my knee and my legs. Went trick-or-treating anyway because the blood made my costume look more real. It was freezing out and I was shivering. Fell again and hurt my hands, but since it was so cold, it hurt even worse. While I was dealing with that, my friends wanted me to go to the neighborhood across the road. I said no, and said that I was hurting too much. One of the kids I was with said that I was a goody-goody because my parents wouldn't let me go and I was lying to them about being in pain. He stole my candy, and I went home bloody and empty-handed. Someone threw a raw egg at my friends and I from a passing pickup and it exploded against the back of my hand. Such pain. Went with some friends downtown Halloween night. Big mistake. People flooded the streets in the thousands. I've never been in such a huge crowd of people before. Couldn't get a drink anywhere. People were drunk, nasty, pushing, shoving. You'd randomly encounter the full spectrum of human emotions from the jubilant to the angry to a small group of girls crying over being ditched by their BFS and the smell of B.O. Weed and piss filled the air. I tolerated it for a couple hours but I had reached my limit. I walked away from the crowds, called for an Uber and hit the bricks. When I was 12 my mom didn't allow me to go out trick-or-treating because I would be kidnapped, robbed, killed and raped. I was also never allowed to wear costumes because it was inappropriate. Last year I had a parent yell at me for wearing a mask and literally almost pulled his kid's arm out of its socket trying to get away from my front door. My son was born via emergency C-section. Worst Halloween prank ever. A dude told me I was too old to trick-or-treat. I was in the 8th grade SMH. It ruined a night I was looking forward to for a month. I was trick-or-treating with my brothers and we walk up to their front porch and ring the doorbell. In our minds we saw a really cool prop of like a body in a casket. So the man answers the door as usual and gives us our candy. Once we go back to the sidewalk the casket opens up and catches everyone off guard. There was a literal person there dressed up as the most realistic zombie and we almost fell. It was terrifying. When I was younger one Halloween my father beat the shit out of my mum and one of my sisters so we hid at a church doing a stupid fall fest for the families who thought trick-or-treating was evil. Then I got made fun of by mant of the spoiled church kids my age that went there because I didn't have a costume and was crying. By the way of this year my father is in prison. When I was around 12 I was pretty much full grown and multiple people told me I was too old to trick-or-treat and some refused to give me candy. So when I was 13 I went to a party and got hammered instead. Lady said, if you can shave your armpits, you're too old to trick-or-treat. I was in 7th grade and had just hit puberty. Thanks lady. Much appreciated. Cop came to my house accusing my friends and I of handing out anthrax-laced candy. This was in 2001 or 2002 during a news-induced anthrax panic. Obviously 3 suburban 15-year-olds did not have access to anthrax. I lost my brakes in my car and crashed it on Halloween. Went through the windshield and had 500 stitches to put my head back together again. I'm fine now but that definitely sucked. Being in the hospital 2 years straight for Halloween and thinking of all my friends trick-or-treating while I couldn't. This year will be my first time trick-or-treating in 2 years and I'm hella pumped. Having people that annoy me at school find my house and attempting to get in. Not worst but best, I'm Australian. Halloween isn't really a thing here, but we still get some kids coming to our door at that time of the year. One time my mum had no lollies, candy, to give, so she just gave the little girl a can of soup we had in the cupboard. That girl was thrilled with the can of minestrone she got. She screamed to her parents, I got soup, wholesome. A few years ago on October 29th, I had an operation on my shoulder, which was closed with 12 staples. On Halloween 2 days later, my young daughter wanted to go trick-or-treating, high on prescription painkillers. I thought it was a great idea to take her. With my arm in a sling, we went trick-or-treating and I ended up racing her from house to house, between 2 houses. I slipped and fell directly on my arm in the sling. It suuuuuuucckkkeedddddddddd. My parents are preachers and Halloween fell on a Sunday one year. The place where we lived it was custom to have 2 services on Sundays and Despite being 12 and the church being a mere 30 feet from the house, I wasn't allowed to go trick-or-treating. My dad insisted on dragging me out Saturday night. It was embarrassing to knock on doors and see the confused faces of the occupants. They weren't expecting any trick-or-treaters the day before Halloween. I finally put up a fight and refused to go to any more houses after one guy, who went to my parents' church, laughed in my face and told me to leave. Choked on a gobstopper. Heimlich got it out of my trachea, but it then got stuck in my esophagus and I got it down with some bread. My throat hurt for days. My parents called an ambulance, but we got it resolved before they came. Super scary. I have 2 young kids now that have been getting gobstoppers, jawbreakers on Halloween since they were 2. I always take them out and throw them away. My dad was pranking trick-or-treaters by spraying them with a water gun from a window as I gave out sweets. The same guy who my dad pissed off followed me and my friends around the neighborhood with a scary mask on to get revenge. When we went out trick-or-treating. So creepy. My grandpa died on Halloween morning when I was 12. And then my dog of 13 years died on Halloween night last year. I still love Halloween, but it is a very hard night for me. Growing up, my parents told me my last year trick-or-treating would be when I was 12. Guess who got diagnosed with T1D just before their 12th birthday? It was heartbreaking seeing my sister dressing up and going trick-or-treating that year while I stayed home and passed out candy I wasn't allowed to have to other kids. Me and my cousin fought over the last Snicker bar. And I don't even like Snickers. Back in like grade 8 or 9, probably the last year, it seemed socially acceptable to go trick-or-treating. We had a hockey game scheduled and the other team didn't show up. We had a scrimmage, and because we were the last game of the night, we just played all night for like 3 hours. Phoned some friends to come out if they wanted. Frock you Orangeville, you owe me candy. When I was like 3, I wasn't allowed to trick-or-treat one year and didn't understand why. Turns out when my mom asked me what I wanted to go as, I told her, a motherfrocker. So yeah, fair call, mom. When my son was little, he had to be the first man out and the last man in. I pushed a stroller around, and he would offload his ill-gotten booty. We are at the last house on the last street, and I'm on the sidewalk, waiting for him to make the run to the door. I looked down and saw one of those plastic snakes that kids have at Halloween laying on the sidewalk. As he's coming toward me, I reach down, pick up the snake, and get ready to throw it at him. It was at this time I realized that it was a live snake in my hand. Grown man, screaming like a little girl, never gonna live it down. Not being allowed to trick-or-treat as a child because it was the devil's work. My dog, who sadly has since passed away, ran away Halloween night. It was dark out and we had no idea where she could have gone. We did end up finding her, but those few hours were pure horror and not the kind you like to feel on Halloween. At 16, I invited some friends for a Halloween party. I decorated the house, which we never did, because we lived too far from the village. Bought food, drinks, rented some horror movies for the night. None of my friends showed up for the stupid reason of, well, I won't go if she doesn't go, and vice versa. So I guess no one wanted to be with me for Halloween. I felt horrible and I cried all night while my mom tried to reassure me. I never did another party after that. It really broke my heart and made me realize how I wasn't important. So this year I'm hosting the Halloween party and I am so stressed that nobody will come or that it will be lame if they do show up. My dad died. I was 13 and wanted to hang with my friends. But my dad insisted that I go to my Civil Air Patrol meeting. I was bummed because we had plans to torment the little trick-or-treaters. Anyway, he dropped me off and never picked me up. Around 11:00 p.m. I was sitting along on the church steps still waiting for him. This was before the era of cell phones. Everyone had just left figuring my dad was just running late. My stepmother didn't drive and didn't give 2 shits about me. I walked 3 miles to my aunt's house. Discovered that my dad had a stroke and I've hated Halloween ever since. So this isn't terrible, just funny and a little embarrassing. Went to Halloween haunt at King's Dominion in 2016. My inquisitive girlfriend looked inside the window of this obvious painted facade that looked like a wagon. Inside was really a dressing room trailer for the costume people paid to go around scaring guests. I'm already like, come on, let's get out of here. Then a clown appears, standing next to us like he was there the whole time. Hey, she's peepin', he squeaks, with red nose and everything. Hey, everyone, she's a peeper. He shouts to guests passing by. He's pointing at her with his goofily large glove. I grabbed her and we ran, and that was the time we almost got cancelled by zombie clowns. My church held a small Halloween festival and I won a small pack of cookies from a game, and when I was showing some other kids my prizes as you do after trick-or-treating, a fat kid stole my cookies and bolted and I never got them back. I didn't chase after him because I was caught completely off guard and took me a moment to realize what just happened. When I was 7, my older stepsister was supposed to be babysitting me while our parents went to have fun. She was going to take me trick-or-treating. Instead, she and her 2 friends tied me up and locked me in the basement next to the furnace. Turned out the lights and left. I spent the entire evening in the dark basement next to the furnace. Frock you, Courtney. Caught a group of 12-year-old boys beating up a boy that was about the same age but much smaller. I was about 16. Came and threw them all off of him and told them to frock off down the road. Walked with the kid for a couple blocks before he met back up with his actual friends. Not really bad. But my parents made me go as Pablo when I was young because I didn't make up my mind. Edit. Pablo the Penguin from Backyardigans. Very tame. But I once dressed up as a bee and almost set my wings on fire with a tiki torch. My dad got real pissed at me for not looking where I was going. Admittedly, not terrible, but still the worst things I remember. 1. My grandmother had sewed me a kid's Harlequin costume, kinda like this, but separate top and bottom, at one of the first houses. I jumped over a cactus Y plant and got stickers all over the pant leg. I had to go home and change. Only wearing the clown top with jeans. Very disappointing. 2. In my early 20s, I was taking an anti-anxiety medicine that I couldn't drink while taking. Do you know how boring it is to be the only sober person at a grown-up Halloween party? Oh, I got a good one. So I was like 10 and noticed a guy following me and my friends in a car slowly to each house. We started running quickly to houses, but he would follow a house or 2 behind. I ended up running to the cops and telling him. He told me to walk to the next house and act normal. So I did. Cop goes up to check this guy out in the car and ends up searching his car. Turns out, the guy wasn't after me and my friends. He was stealing from each house that didn't answer. So we were his bait to knock. If it wasn't for me, this guy wouldn't have got arrested. I once punched a guy dressed as a scarecrow full on in the face. I was probably about 7 to 8 and there was a scarecrow sitting on the porch on a rocking chair. Looked like someone just stuffed it with straw and all. Well, after grabbing my candy, the scarecrow tried to reach out and scare me and I reactively punched it in the face. Turned out to be an older guy dressed up and told me to promptly frock off. Which I kindly obliged, having just assaulted him. Sorry dude, don't scare people if you don't want to end up with a broken nose or worse. Pretty sure I broke his nose that night because I recall he was bleeding. I went upstate in NY to spend Halloween with a buddy at SUNY New Paltz and a huge snowstorm knocked out the power until the next day. Turns out costume parties are significantly less fun with tons of snow to walk through to get to them and zero light to see with. Slept over at a friend's house after trick-or-treating and I walked in on their friend's dad taking a sit. I totally forgot to knock. Found out they don't use door locks. Didn't sleep over at their house after that. Every time I hand out candy in my Darth Vader outfit, some youngling blindsides me in the head with his lightsaber. Every time. This lady yelled at me for ringing her doorbell. A random old lady told me I'm a grown-up and shouldn't do those kid stuff. I was out walking on Halloween and someone drove past and chucked a full-sized pumpkin at me. Some dude was walking around my neighborhood in a hockey mask, threatening kids with a wrench. We actually encountered him, but since we were with my dad, who's 6'4" and was wearing a jacket that made him look huge, he didn't approach or bother us. Then we encountered a group of his victims. Around 4 kids who were about a year older than me at the time, outside of a house. They were really shaken up and claimed he chased them with the wrench. So my friends and I calmed them down while my dad and the owner of the house, who was a really nice lady, called the police. Wrench guy was arrested and turned out to be a 14-year-old from the next neighborhood over who wanted to cause some trouble. IDK what happened to him, but I assume his parents weren't pleased. Friend got punched in the face and robbed for a $20 bag of weed by a crust gutter punk in downtown Portland. We rode the bus home with him holding a t-shirt to his bloody, leaking face the entire ride. I'm sure more than a few people thought it was just a really good costume. Every frocking Halloween I've had. It's been rainy. I broke my toe walking up a staircase in a bar. When I was 8 I went as Darth Maul. I had a plastic mask and a black robe and a double lightsaber. The works. Like 30 minutes into the night my mask broke. So I just had to pretend my costume was a ninja instead. However, my 4-year-old brother picked up my broken mask and wore it with his Winnie the Pooh costume and decided he was Darth Pooh. So at least I got to learn that my brother is funny. One Halloween I was attending a family party in Brooklyn. I was standing outside getting a breath of air when I heard an egg crack on the ground near me. I looked up and saw a couple of punks standing on the elevated subway platform at New Utrecht Avenue pointing and laughing. A few years later, when I was in high school, another bunch of miscreants broke into my school's lunchroom on Halloween. They trashed the kitchen, shattered windows and tried to burn the place down. They spray-painted anti-Semitic messages on the walls to make sure we knew who did it. My husband died last year at 4 a.m. on Halloween. One Halloween I took some ecstasy with my friends. I put it in quotes because we just got some random pills with who knows what the frock in it. One of my friends had a really bad reaction to it. Started freaking out. Thought we were all literal vampires that were out to kill him. He took off down the street and we had to follow him and physically stop him from going up to random houses in my neighborhood and ringing the doorbell at 3 a.m. When I was 10 I wanted to be a vampire for Halloween, but the only costume they had was a size too big for me. The cape was dragging on the ground and I tripped and broke my wrist by falling on it. My dad thought I was just crying too much and I wasn't hurt, so he made me carry my candy with that arm. We actually got a lot of candy that year and I remember my bag was full to the brim with the stuff. But after 2 hours of carrying candy with a broken wrist I gave it away to my cousins because I felt like I was going to be sick from the pain. It wasn't until I went to bed and my mom went to check on me to see why I was crying at 2 a.m. did they notice my wrist was swollen and I had a fever. I still frockin' love vampires though. I was in high school and my friends and I got invited to a college Halloween party. An hour before leaving for the party, the guys called my friend and said they didn't want a fat girl there. Me. Of course. Turns out, my friends didn't find this an issue and still wanted to go. I cried in my car, in the rain, in my costume for a few hours before I went home and told my mom the party was lame. Had a miscarriage on Halloween. When I was about 14, a full-grown adult man, friend of my friend's family, looked at me and said, "You can take off your ugly mask now," and laughed. Wasn't wearing a mask, so when my therapist asks, "When did your insecurities about your appearance start?" that usually comes up. I got pepper sprayed and tear gassed at a celebration when police decided to shut down the block party early. Not even going trick-or-treating ever since kindergarten. I remember in high school, I went with my friends and their younger elementary-aged relatives to take them trick-or-treating. Every neighborhood we went to, all the lights were off. Hardly anyone was giving out candy. This was only 2015 or 2016 by the way. I remember feeling really bad for the youngins. When I was 12 Leonardo came out of the bushes from the house I was getting candy from and scared me so hard I fell flat on my ass. 5 stray black cats that we'd been caring for several years disappeared and have not been seen since. And yay, they had all been spayed, neutered and vaccinated. When we were 18, my then boyfriend, later ex-husband, and I went to chill at a friend's brother's house. One friend was screwing around, going through the hall closet for some reason, and found a rusted shotgun. He jokingly pointed it at T. Told him to stop messing around and pointed at the floor. Friend laughed at him but pointed out down as he said, "Come on. It's not loaded and this old thing won't fire anyway." Then he proceeded to shoot through the kitchen floor. Unrelated story. 4 years later, T and I spent Halloween in the hospital with our week-old son, worried he wouldn't survive a mystery fever of 104. He recovered and is turning 25 this month. FYI, Halloween isn't a good time for me. Got a call from my little sister that her best friend, 18-year-old girl, was hit full speed by a drunk driver right in front of her. Flew in the air and splattered her brains on the pavement right in front of her. When I was 15, I in a car full of my friends, saw my ex, who I thought I was still cool with, walking down the street, so I decided to hop out to say, "Hey." Turns out ex didn't want anything to do with me, and by the time I found this out, my friends had already sped off. I tried calling all my friends, but none of them answered. I didn't want to call my mom because I was embarrassed by the whole thing, so I just waited for them to come back. They took their sweet time and then some. I sat there by myself on a street corner at night for about 2 hours in a crappy costume with nothing to do but feel stupid about the whole thing. By the time they picked me up, I was over all of it. First time going trick-or-treating in my brother's girlfriend's neighborhood. We had to drive over at 7:30. Tot starts at 6 where I'm from. Wait at her house for her to get ready. Took over a frocking hour and her costume was just a masquerade mask and dress. Had to go with her niece who didn't want to walk in front of us. Her parents came with us but they were in the back chatting. She also kept walking in front of me, slowly, so I kept accidentally stepping on her. Had houses give us lip balm. To the girls. And alcohol. To the adults. And barely any candy. It was almost 9 when the houses stopped giving out candy. We didn't even finish half of a street and already had to go home. I've gotten at least a dozen pieces of candy but that's frocking disappointing. Went out the night before Halloween to party with friends and got a DUI, so I had to spend Halloween in jail. Worst jail party ever. My stepfather attempted to murder my family. Literally every Halloween for this one. It's always fucking raining.